his relative inexperience within the company at the time, a bold but very interesting pitch in which he suggested that he could bring two iconic characters back to the table for the price of one. And his idea was to make Hal Jordan the next host of the Spectre. We have to keep in mind, in 1999, Jeff Johns was not the chief architect of DC's continuity. He was not the chief creative officer. He didn't have his hands all over various elements of the DC Comics multi media complex. He was a writer who was cutting his teeth on writing titles like Stars and Stripe. He was also a junior partner along with James Robinson and David S. Squire on the new JSA book. So, while today you might say, well, anything that Jeff Johns pitches to DC is going to be picked up with a snap of the fingers, back in 1999, I imagine that there were some within DC editorial who said, what is this kid thinking of? And clearly, there were some within the brain trust who took a shine to the young Jeff Johns. My feeling is that it was Dan DiDio who was the leader in promoting Johns' idea. I've always got the sense that Johns and DiDio have a pretty good working relationship. John seems to be the more soft-spoken one. He's certainly confident in presenting himself to the public, but Dan DiDio has that really gregarious, outgoing nature, and so I think Johns is willing to be the ideas man, and he's the one who focuses on things getting done, and he knows that DiDio is the one who's going to come out and sell the big ideas and get people pumped up. But I really think it was Dan DiDio who listened to Johns' pitch and said, yeah, let's give this the green light. Pardon yet another pun on my part, folks. And indeed, as the soon-to-be released Day of Judgment series would prove, Johns' plan for bringing Hal back as the host of the Spectre still allowed for Hal Jordan's history as a hero who went bad and had a tragic downfall to stay intact. So there was, at least at this point, no need for any major retconning. So for those who, within the DC Brain Trust, didn't want Hal to be a squeaky clean hero, again, all of a sudden, they didn't have to worry about Johns overstepping his bounds, let's say, and undoing what different creators have been trying to do with Hal over the past few years. So, the title of the miniseries was Day of Judgment, written by Jeff Johns. And reading it today, it really comes across as a piece of work written by a talented young writer who is still developing his craft and his voice in writing. The lack of the in-depth inner monologue, dialogue between the characters, tendency towards more straight-up comic book action. These are signs that this was a very young Jeff Johns writing. Certainly, it feels different from his later work, from when he was more established within DC's writing stable. But still, an entertaining story. And this is the story in which Hal Jordan becomes the Spectre. And it basically comes about as a result of a tete-a-tete between the fallen angel Asmodel, Etrigan the Demon, and Neron. And talk about a character that DC has tried so hard over the years to make a preeminent bad guy in the DCU, and has really fallen on its proverbial face every time. I think of so many different stories involving Nero, and I just think, wow, there was an idea there, but the execution wasn't quite there. But what I appreciate here in this story is that Mr. Johns wasn't trying to set up Neron as the big bad, because, of course, the focus was on telling the story of how Hal became the host of the Spectre. So it's Etrigan who binds Asmodel to the Spectre force. I just need to backtrack and say that leading up to Day of Judgment, there was a story arc in the JLA title in which was revealed that the Spectre had actually been trapped in the Rock of Eternity, but he was freed in order to help the JLA on his current mission. And Alan Scott, the first Green Lantern of Earth, was present for this story, and at the end of that story arc, he wasn't able to find a new host for the Spectre Force. And so in Day of Judgment, Alan references that and says, I really should not have let the Spectre go without finding him a new host. Because following one of the things that was established by Mr. Ostrander Mandrake, the Spectre could be heavily and very dangerously influenced by its host, as we see in the story, as Asmodel, having the power of the Spectre, basically brings hell on Earth and freezes hell over, forcing the hero community to band together to fight the chaos that is erupting in New York. And they quickly realize that in order to restore order, Asmodel has to be booted out, and the Spectre must have a new, much more stable host. And so Plan A for a group of heroes, including Wonder Woman and Alan Scott, is to go to the gates of heaven and appeal to Jim Corrigan to return to his duty as the host. And now, for those who are thinking that the more Christian or religious aspects of the Spectre, as brought forth by Ostrander Mandrake, would be downplayed, not so much here. The way that the gates of heaven, the Archangel Michael, are illustrated in the story actually line up with what Mr. Mandrake was doing artistically. And so it actually establishes that heaven, Michael, God, or the presence, they weren't just entirely perceptions coming straight from Jim Corrigan. Those are actually larger concepts which really do exist within the DCU. But Plan A fails when the heroes soon learn that Jim Corrigan is a very changed man. The anger that fueled him during his days as host of the Spectre is gone, and he explains that he's at peace now. He's in heaven with his true love, Amy Baderman, and that's where he belongs now. And it's nice seeing Amy Baderman, too, in a cameo role here. So Plan B is for the heroes to go to Limbo, which in 1999 was a place where heroes were consigned if their acts of heroism saved them from being sent to hell, but certain acts they committed in life, such as murder or suicide, barred them entry into heaven. And so it's here that Hal Jordan steps forward and expresses his desire to seek redemption, and he's willing to do whatever the heroes need him to do. And so he quickly accepts a sales pitch from Alan Scott. Alan says that outside of Jim Corrigan, Hal Jordan is the only man who has the force of will necessary to control the Spectre's rage, and that's good enough for Hal. And so he exits Limbo with the other heroes, and his first attempt to bond with the Spectre don't go off so well. he needs an assist from Captain Marvel using the Spear of Destiny to force his way inside the Spectre, where there is a conference, if you will, between the Spectre Force, Hal as Modell, and Neron, who decides to throw his ring in the hat. And so Spectre Force wants all three individuals to give their pitches as to why they should be the Spectre's permanent host. And of course, as Modell and Neron go the villainous route, where they suggest that the Spectre Force has quite a lot in common with them. Spectre Force has been smited over time and has been snubbed and cast out of heaven, and so by joining with one of them, the Spectre can have true vengeance against the presence, against heaven, and indeed can rule over all of eternity. Hal's appeal, though, is quite different, where he breaks down and he says that he does not deserve the Spectre's power. If anything, he deserves to be punished for all of the murders he committed earlier. And that's what perks up the Spectre Force's proverbial ears. And the Wrath says, well, Hal Jordan, if punishment is what you want, punishment is what you shall get. And I can think of no greater punishment than for you to serve as my host. And there's a flash of light, and we see for the first time a major change in the Spectre's visual appearance. Now, going back to the Zero issue, as well as one or two other flashback stories from the Ostrander Mandrake run, it was established that each host of the Spectre could imprint certain aspects of their physical features upon the Spectre. For instance, Karaka gave the Spectre a mustache. When the Spectre was bound to a female soul somewhere in the 1600s and 1700s, the Spectre took on feminine facial features as well as general female anatomy. Here now, with Hal as the host, it looks like the Spectre is wearing a recolored standard Green Lantern Corps uniform. There's a leotard, the long gloves, the high boots, the Green Lantern mask, and in the center of the Spectre's chest there is a fiery green circle, which, when the flames die down, reveal a classic Green Lantern logo on the chest. The green hooded cloak, which is so iconic, is still there. But again, it speaks to Hal's will, his indomitable character, that he inspires such a change in the Spectre's physical look. And it really speaks to how quickly Jim Corrigan lost his own sense of self when he became the host of the Spectre. Now, yes, it was established by Ostrander Mandrake that Corrigan was also inspired by a crudely drawn costume design sketched by Percival Popp, but one could argue that Percival was probably tapping into some divine inspiration of his own. But the fact that Jim Corrigan didn't imbue any of his own physical attributes onto the Spectre goes to show just how little sense of self Jim Corrigan had to begin with. So that's the first significant thing to take out of this story, is the fact that we get, for the first time, a major costume redesign for the Spectre. Now, the story comes to an end with Neron trying to break Hal's will by encouraging Hal to use the power of the Spectre to punish him. And here we get an important revelation. Hal has no interest in being a spirit of vengeance. He is going to turn the Spectre into a spirit of redemption. And in fact, Neron gets recalled to Hell, where he gets reduced several pay grades